neither China nor the United States signed the Kyoto Protocol when it was up for signature, right? The reason neither China nor the United States did it was because it, quote, was not in the national interest. Well, if you posit national interest and environmental interests as an either-or proposition, the environment's going to be neglected. But if you can see it as a both-and, how do we take care of our country and our national interests and take care of the environment? You've got a much better chance of dealing effectively with issues like global warming and other issues that are out there. Okay, so in summary, polarities are interdependent pairs. They're energy systems in which we live and work. Why should you bother with them? Because you can stop wasting time and energy attempting to solve issues that are inherently unsolvable. You can effectively address issues about which people are polarized, and you can increase our chances of thriving as a humanity. David, I can't remember his last name. David, he was working at Intel of Ireland, and he called me up and he said, "Barry, I've read your book, and I think it's great." And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And he said, "I think we're going to have you come to Intel of Ireland in about a year to 18 months." And I said, "About a year to 18 months?" And I said, "Well, what's that all about?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I'm going to have the executive team demand that I bring you over." And he said, "But I got to wait for them to demand it." And I said, "Well, what's going to happen in those 18 months that they're going to demand to be over?" He said, "Well, he said, I sit in on the executive." He was in charge of OD for Intel of Ireland. And he said, "We're going to be having executive team meetings, and there's going to be something that's going to show up, and we're going to be in a struggle with it, and I'm going to know for sure in my gut that this is a polarity. And I'm going to say, I think this might be a polarity, and I think we ought to look at it this way." And he said, "Then I'm going to wait for another time when there's something I'm just sure is another one of those polarities. And he said, when it happens, I'm going to say, I think this is going to be a good way to look at this." And he said, then they're finally going to say, well, what is it about this polarity thing? And so yeah, that was his strategy. So make it useful. Don't sell them. Just make it useful. And if it's useful, if they do experience it as useful, then they'll want to use it. Sure enough, 16 months later, he calls me up. And he says, "Barry, do you remember me?" I said, "Well, yes, I do, David." He said, "Well, my boss, my executive team has demanded that you come to Ireland." So that was his thing. So I want to finish with a quote for a couple of reasons. One is it's obvious to me that there are mostly women in the group here. And I want to appreciate that a woman who, and again, the slide will be available to you, who was articulating this phenomena about interdependent pairs. It shows up in the literature as paradox or dilemma or tensions, right? But about this phenomena. And so I just want to read this to you as a closing thing for the day. It's Sister Teresa of Avila. "If we choose to live a more spiritual life, then we need to become more spontaneous, more engaged, and more contemplative. Living a spiritual life means we're able to live our life in total polarity. This means we are at once at ease in the in-between spaces, between traditional and progressive viewpoints, between rational and emotional responses, between taking action and just being there, between solitude and leisure, between fasting and feast, between discipline and wildness. If we are not growing in our spiritual life, then we get stuck on one end of the spectrum or the other, and we can end up bland, lukewarm, mediocre, and isolated. The only way to live a spiritual life is to be able to touch both sides at the same time. knowing that it is in the interplay between living the spectrum of these opposite polar forces that we deepen our spirituality and become more aware of who we are, whom we choose to be, and in challenging times, how we show up. Sister Teresa, March 28th, 1515. Now, this phenomena is as old as we are, as old as civilization. And people have been writing about it like Sister Teresa for a long time. The gift that you have is a